All right, very nice to see everybody. We will get started. I'm Chris Edelson. I teach in the government department.
I'm Paul Johnson. I work in University Communications, and one of my colleagues, another public relations manager, is here today, Rebecca Basu. I handle the School of International Service and the School of Public Affairs, which is how I got to know Chris.
Yes, which we will talk about today.
And my colleague Rebecca handles CAS and the Arts Center, Katzen. And then we have another colleague who handles COGOT and the School of Communications. So that'll help as we go on here.
Yes, we will explain how some of that is relevant. So let's see what the slides
Okay.
are. So what we're going to talk about today is basically something that was really new to me. I'm a professor. I was writing a book. I was thinking about ways to publicize it, basically, and I got connected to Paul sort of fortuitously. I didn't know that any of these kind of support mechanisms existed. Paul was around and things like that, and we'll talk about how that was really useful in terms of finding opportunities for me to put my scholarship into kind of media context, writing about it in various forms and talking about it, TV, radio, different presentations, which I had no idea was possible.
Right. So Chris mentions a very good point. You won't see Rebecca and I, our offices are not on this campus.
Right. That's
We're actually located, we used to be located in the Tenley building until we were evicted, and now we're at 4401 Connecticut Avenue. So that's part of the reason why
yes.
We're one of the best kept secrets on campus, but that's why we like to participate.
Yes, best kept secret, but incredibly valuable to know about.
Exactly, because we are here for you, and we have this great source of knowledge, and we want to help make your research, impactful and relevant, not just for your colleagues and other academics around the country, but also for the public at large.
Yes.
And so we're going to discuss some ways we can accomplish this and how University Communications can help you achieve these results. And we kind of put this together like a little mini case study based on Chris's work and the launch of his book in August 2013.
Yes, and at the outset, let me say I'm incredibly grateful to Paul. I mean, one of the nice things about finding Paul is how helpful this has been, just to make sure I say that up front.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
So just to give you a quick overview, when we just don't take a scattershot to finding media outlets for you to speak to approach. What we do is we target media. So we know you don't have a lot of time, that you have office hours, that you're serving on various committees, that you have your own teaching responsibilities, and that media never comes at a convenient time. The news cycle's 24 hours. We work on an on-call system, so we get calls at 8, 9 o'clock at night sometimes, or on the weekends. We're not going to bother you with what we think are not high-level media opportunities. So this slide kind of shows you what our target top media that we're aiming for. And obviously these are ones that you all know. Some of these might not be important for SPA, but they might be important for CAS, Psychology Today, or Science 2.0, or Scientific American, or for SOC, Filmmaker, or for COGOT, Entrepreneur Magazine. So each school kind of has its own targeted list, but then we have an overall target list. And so that's who we're going to pitch.
And let me say about that, one thing that was incredibly valuable to me, I've been writing for a long time. I started writing blog posts in 2005. I would always try to find a home for them. Doing it on my own was incredibly unsuccessful and incredibly frustrating. I write all the time. I was probably writing, 10 or 12 things a month. Maybe one of them would get published somewhere. It was usually something obscure. I ended up creating a personal blog where I post things that 8 people looked at it. So one of the incredibly valuable things, probably the most valuable thing to me about this, is that now when I write stuff, first of all, Paul will give me opportunities to speak about things, which is great too. I can't do that on my own. But when I write something, rather than it going on my obscure blog, it can go to a real place. Sometimes the Los Angeles Times, which is really great, or places that might not be as well known, but are still really useful to me and still way better than what I was doing before. So that's something that's just really useful to me, and I think would be to others probably too.
And I think just to add on to that before we start this slide is, the same way that you're experts in your fields, by relying on us, Rebecca, myself, Erica, we build relationships. So when we send an op-ed, for example, to the LA Times, it's more likely going to be read because they know that we've kind of run it through the traps. It's going to be 650 words in length. We'll get into more of this later.
Yes.
Or if we're pitching reporters, if I'm pitching the White House reporters, they kind of know I'm tailoring the pitch to them and the research. and it's not just kind of coming to them randomly. So they say, oh, Paul Johnson, American University, let's open this up and see what's going on. Rather than getting 500 emails over the course of a semester from different professors, it's kind of, we've earned legitimacy with the journalists. That's not to say if you don't have if you have a relationship with, let's say, the people who put out Monkey Cage at Washington Post, you should certainly leverage that relationship. But if you're going in cold, come to us. We're really here for you.
Yes. In the past, what I was doing, I would literally go to newspapers, mainly find an email address and send it to them, and that's close to useless. I mean, once in a while would work, but so infrequently that it was driving me crazy.
And then, again, you just don't have the time to track down.
Right.
You have to submit one at a time to those top newspapers. So, you know, I'm kind of keeping the egg timer going. Oh, it's been 2 days. Let's move it. Plan B.
Yes.
So let's begin our case study of bridging research with media.
So I wrote this book. I'm a lawyer by background. Started teaching here in 2009 and was really interested in presidential power. We were just talking to people at the lunch. I mean, one of the things that's sort of weird for me is when horrible things happen in the world, it's a good opportunity for me to write, which is kind of, it's weird. But you know what's going on in France, things like that, that's the kind of stuff I write about. Not so much terrorist methods or even counterterrorism, but the legality of responses to terrorism. Things like, is Guantanamo justified? What about the surveillance programs that Snowden revealed? When can the president use military force unilaterally? The torture report, things like that. So I wrote a book about this called Emergency Presidential Power, and I'd written it was coming out, and I thought, oh, it would be nice, you know, I know university publications, it's published by the University of Wisconsin Press. I found out the average number of sales is like 250 copies. So you're never gonna, you know, get huge amounts, but I thought maybe I can do a little better than that. So I went in search of trying to find someone to support me with this, and that's how I got in touch with Paul.
So, and what was great is Chris's book was coming out in December.
Right, I remember to do this in advance, that's right.
Of 2013.
Yeah.
And we actually work on a calendar system, just like you're planning out probably your classes for the fall of 2015 at this point, probably now and not you know, the day classes start. So we have a calendar, and it helps because we want to understand your research. In some cases, it's easier than other cases. If it's something about molecular biology, Rebecca needs time to really digest that and ask some specific questions, because it's like learning a foreign language in some cases. Whereas policy is a little easier to digest, but if it's a book, you want to read hopefully more than the first chapter and the last chapter, because you want to be able to talk about it intelligently to the journalists, because they're semi-mini experts on the topic too, and they know when they're getting, you know, used car salesman pitch versus somebody who really can say, well, this is what this professor can tell you, and you won't be wasting your time with that.
Right.
So that's if you leave with nothing else today, advance notice is really appreciated.
That was I wasn't thinking about that much. This kind of happened. Probably because I was excited about the book. But one thing about publishing books is it takes forever, so you can know for a long time when it's happening.
Right.
One thing is that when I started talking to Paul, though, so he had ideas about what to do specifically to market. And one thing I remember he said to me that was really smart, really stuck with me is, and I hadn't thought about this. I was just thinking again about trying to publicize the book a little bit. It didn't occur to me to connect with my interest in writing op-eds. And Paul said, try to write an op-ed. Think about a hook. You know, think about something that's going on. He mentioned, you know, like State of the Union or something like that. And I thought, whoa, that's a great idea. So now, and that's really put me in a mode now where I look. In the past, I would write about things that kind of interested me, without focusing on my topic of research. Now I look for things, like I say, that are often hideous things going on in the world that give me an opportunity to write. And that was something that Paul really put into my mind, and I followed that for the last year and a half.
Right. So for example, Chris sometimes will say, hey, here's an op-ed I've written, you know, that he's written on his own. But I have a comfort level with Chris now where I know he likes to write op-eds, and that's in his comfort zone. So I think I might even said with the Bergdahl release, hey, is this something
you did? I hadn't heard about that. I remember you told me.
And
the prisoner exchange from Guantanamo, Obama sent people over in exchange for this guy who was being held. Yes, I remember. I hadn't heard about that.
So just this last line here, developing a strategy. Not every professor needs to write op-eds or, you know, necessarily do television. It's finding a comfort level, and that's what the public relations managers hope to do with each and every faculty member that's interested. If you just want to write op-eds, that's great. If you want to do radio, that's fine. If you have an aversion to doing live television, or you only want to do taped interviews where they come to you, we can make that work for you, and that's how we build the strategy in the end. I know op-eds in particular I like because it's 650 words basically that are your words that are unfiltered through a reporter, and it makes you a thought leader in whatever publication it ultimately appears in. And I think, especially for the School of Public Affairs and probably the School of International Service, where you're talking more policy, that's something I think the deans really appreciate.
Yeah, I would suspect it could work in a lot of areas though. I think one thing that's been nice for me about it is it's something I do naturally. I like it. It's things I'm working on, I'm interested in, and it's my research I'm doing. I think of it as like the same thing I'm writing a book about, an article about, just a shorter format. So it actually doesn't take a lot of time. At this point, I can do an op-ed on something's happening in an hour or so usually. So it's quick, and you get the satisfaction of seeing something come out of it. Almost like working with Paul on it, I know it'll get placed somewhere. It's not always going to be the LA Times, and it might be something else, but it's going to get somewhere, which is nice.
Right, and so that brings us to our next slide, media strategy and execution. So Chris already mentioned he's a lawyer by training, so he likes to argue, right? And op-eds in essence are arguments. So we devised an op-ed strategy, and like Chris said, when this was right around with Syria.
Right. So actually, it was because of what you had said.
Right.
Like, Paul put this in my mind. That Paul had said, "Hey, try to come up with a book for this." So coincidentally, fortuitously for me, again, not so great for the world. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out completely terribly. Summer 2013, President Obama announces he's going to use military force. Syrian dictator Assad has crossed the red line, chemical weapons. It's a really good book for me. It's something I can talk about easily and write about easily. And so I said, I'll write something about it. And now it is hard. You have to make time sometimes. As Paul said, you can't plan when this is going to happen. Right. It was August 31st. The semester was about to start. I had a busy semester. I have 2 young kids. Well, one was not born yet, but the other one was, she's around making her present. She's good, but it's time consuming. And I remember really scrambling to get this done, but it really paid off because I read this up. Paul sends the LA Times, and I'm like, all right, I didn't really think we'd get there. And he writes back and says they're going to publish it, I was really excited.
Right. And so the key here was, had Chris not gotten in contact with me in July, several months before his book was published, we would have missed this whole opportunity. So, and it also was a marketing opportunity because in the tagline of the op-ed, it says Chris Edelson is author of a forthcoming book, Presidential Emergency
Power. A little hyperlink.
Right.
And actually, I noticed, I'm crazy about this kind of stuff. It's sort of stupid because, again, you don't sell many books in economic publication. But you can look at Amazon and see if more people are buying it, and whenever an op-ed comes out, it jumps up. Or if you go on C-SPAN, it jumps up. So, I think the book sold like 1,000 copies, so this is not a bestseller, but it's cool to see it. Again, it makes you feel like you're doing something tangible that's producing, which is cool.
Exactly. So what happened was, we were lucky. When you go to your first choice, especially with a big paper like the LA Times, you're going in, you kind of know you checked off the list, 650 words, provocative, first line, so on and so forth. And we hadn't taken something there for a while, and they liked this piece. It was very timely for them. It wasn't evergreen, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And what happened was, this ultimately snowballed.
Yes.
So the president then, a couple days later, spoke, and
it was. So I had written this piece, not that I affected anything, but I didn't think what I was saying really would matter. I expected, my view of presidential power, I take a view that presidential power should be limited. The presidents don't really have an opportunity, don't have the ability to act unilaterally, except when the United States is being attacked. Most presidents take a different view. They think they can use military force more broadly. Obama was ready to use it in Syria. I didn't think it was justified constitutionally. No one was writing about it, but that's something that was a good angle too. Everyone was writing about the question of whether it was justified under international law. The United Nations had to weigh in. Nobody was talking about the U.S. law question. So I made that point, but I thought he's going to do this, and he's done this before in Libya. It turned out he didn't. Members of Congress wrote him letters and said, you shouldn't do this, it's not constitutional. They're making the argument I did, not because I said it, but it was the same argument, and he ended up not doing it. So it created opportunities to talk about it on WUSA, I remember, some other places too, and it just kind of continued.
And then that night when the president was actually speaking, the LA Times said, hey, would you be interested in talking to us afterwards? And so Chris was taking notes during the speech.
Yeah, Obama ended up speaking and saying why he ultimately decided to go to Congress asking for approval, and he gave a speech about it. So I could, they had me, I think they had a few people post responses.
Exactly, so it was almost another bite at the apple.
Right.
And then even better, somebody on the editorial page
at the LA
Times ended up quoting his op-ed. So, and look, that was just luck. I had nothing to do with that. But that's how these things work, because you're out there. So to the point now where if you Google, presidential power or something, Chris is going to come up as in one, in the first page of the Google search. which that probably wasn't going to happen prior to
No, I hadn't had this stuff out
this
there
op-ed
before.
campaigns
Yeah.
and strategy. So subsequently, we said, well, what else can we do here? And we contacted the National Constitution Center.
Which you suggested.
Right.
I think you knew somebody there. You knew the guy
Well,
who did the blog. Right?
I was just kind of saying, you know, research with an impact. You might have heard about this
Right.
through other people in our office, and
I hadn't, so it was good to hear.
the provost and Terry Flannery. We said, well, let's look for places outside of DC, because it's very hard to get media to come cover something on the AU campus. But if you make an event somewhere at an interesting place, sometimes there's a better opportunity. So sure enough, Chris was able to talk to the person who wrote the foreword to his book, Lou Fisher, who is...
Well, it was before that, actually. What happened first was I wrote another piece. I'm not sure if it was on Syria now. It might be something else. But Paul connected me with National Constitution Center in Philadelphia has a blog, Constitution Daily.
Right.
Paul connected me with a guy. They posted it. And then I think you spoke to him and you said, hey, yeah, exactly. And the guy who wrote the book with me, who's a really big name in the field, I feel like nobody really knows about, but he's to people in the field, they know him. Lou Fisher said you'd speak with me too, so we set up an event at the National Constitution Center with the guy who's the head of the place, and it was a fun trip. We went to Philadelphia,
right, and
they put it on C-SPAN too.
Right,
yeah.
And so we made an event with interesting people in a place where hopefully colleagues, they're obviously big universities in the Philly area.
Or at the very least an audience.
And at the Constitution Center, an audience. And they even ordered books. They had books available.
Right, that's nice too. Yes,
which was nice. So
yeah.
it was just another opportunity to get the book out there to a different audience.
And then it's on C-SPAN, which people, at least in my department, are like, oh, C-SPAN.
And it repeats several times.
Right.
Which is good. So then throughout, again, since Chris has this talent, like several professors here at AU have, we just started looking for news hooks for op-eds. So subsequently, we had an op-ed in Newsday in New York, which is kind of just one of the papers where if you live in the New York area, along with the New York Times, maybe the Post, you end up getting Newsday if you live on Long Island. That's an influential paper. Then some more niche publications, like most recently in Reason.
Right.
Magazine.
Reason is like a libertarian kind of. I'm not a libertarian myself, but some of my stuff kind of coincides with them. So and students are really into it, which is cool.
And U.S. News and World Report, which I think everyone might know now, is now a web-based publication, not a print magazine anymore. And the reason why I mention that is it doesn't really matter if you're in literal print, like newspaper print, or online. As long as you're searchable, that's what's really important. So, if you Google, presidential power, I mean, what's really the difference if it comes up as Reason Magazine or the New York Times, if it's an op-ed and it's a thought leader piece? It doesn't really. And you can't, with op-eds, you can't really go back to the same paper right after you've been published in it. There's usually kind of like a moratorium before you can submit something else, because they have so little space for unsolicited pieces.
I still like the print stuff, because Wendy's, I know we're talking about during lunch. But hey,
right.
You can't always get it.
And that's always our plan. We always have plan A. We want to go to where the professor really wants to be. But for example, with the Washington Post, because that's the one I most often hear here, is that I want to be in the Washington Post. Well,
that's pretty hard.
The facts are that over the last 10 years, the op-ed pages are dominated by syndicated columnists. So the Post has 7 slots a week for unsolicited op-eds, 3 for domestic or 4 for domestic, and then the rest for international issues. And as much as I think everybody at American University or professor is talented, you're competing against presidents of other countries,
former secretaries
of state, ambassadors, former ambassadors, Henry Kissinger, all these people. So it's tough. And I don't want to miss an opportunity for you. But we'll go there, and we have a relationship with the Post now where we'll hear back from them usually within 24 to 48 hours. But then we agree on a plan B.
Yeah,
and
that's such a huge help, because when I used to send my pieces in without knowing anyone, I had no idea. You're just like, oh, waiting a few days, I don't know. It's nice when Paul's doing this, I can actually hear, oh, somebody is reading it. They're looking at it. Great. That's really helpful to know.
And again, because of our relationships, The Hill is here because The Hill revamped their website last summer. And they called us and they said, well, you know, we're revamping this. You know, you have some experts who'd like to be regular contributors. We need a minimum of 6 pieces during the next year. So that opened up an opportunity for Chris and several other professors and other schools here to become regular contributors to reach that very specific K Street, Capitol Hill staff audience, and that's worked out pretty well.
That's another nice place. It's a place where I know if I want to get something published, that's just they'll do it. It's not. So that's good.
So we kind of went through these points here.
Let's move just to make sure we get the questions.
Yeah, just to move on here, we'll go. As I already mentioned about op-eds, you know, these are your words, unfiltered. The other nice thing about op-eds and interviews and things along those lines is hopefully either people in your department, certainly University of Communications will do it, we'll tweet it out, hopefully it'll be retweeted. So it's not just when that op-ed or that interview appears, it's leveraging social media too to spread it out to various people. And hopefully maybe somebody at a think tank sees it and could invite you to a panel. A colleague could call you and invite you to a panel at their university.
Or another place, like just anyone might happen to notice. That's happened sometimes, you're right.
So it's the exposure to research. So this is, again, it's just a graphic of how the book was the core. And a lot of what Chris talks about comes from the core of the book. In
yes.
the op-eds.
As I said, I see it as a condensed form of the same research I'm doing in a book or articles or scholarly articles.
So, but for the book, we wouldn't have had these other opportunities.
This is just the piece I wrote that we were talking about that went in on the Syria issue, which was nice and led to some other things. And then whenever you write something, it might get posted somewhere else too, which is nice.
Right, and as you see here, you have the print 1.5 million print subscribers, but then you have the 22 million online viewers, which just goes to show online is a very, very good place to be. So please don't discount online publications.
Sure. So then, so we had done C-SPAN through the thing in Philadelphia. I also know C-SPAN has the show Book TV, so I thought, let's try to get the book on specifically in that context too. And we were able to, it wasn't through Book TV, it was Washington Journal. I think the Philadelphia thing was Book TV, right?
That was Book TV.
But this was something except they also do this call-in show in the morning, which is fun for me. I mean, it's kind of like class, you know, people are calling in, the callers might be a little crazier, but it's the same basic idea. You're just going on, I talked about my book and I took calls. It was a lot of fun. It was nice to do. I think the host was an AU grad too or something.
Yeah.
Nice, right? Yeah.
And you know, Chris and I did a little media training before that as well, you know, because you do get these callers, and we talked about how to handle the people that talk about conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
and,
which did happen.
You know, the undoubtedly the JFK assassination stuff comes up. You know,
something like
these kind of
that
crazy things come
yeah.
up, and if the moderator doesn't handle it, we talked about how to handle those things. So another good reason to work with our office, we can kind of put you through the gauntlet, so to speak. And then, so Chris's name is out there now, and we get calls. We like to be a proactive office, but we also are a reactive office. So we get calls every day from the media. And Sinclair Broadcast Group is an example of a television conglomerate. They own ABC, CBS, Fox, affiliates around the country. They reach 1/3 of the television viewing population in the United States. And so oftentimes, they'll want to talk about something, and they actually come to campus, and these are sound bites. This is not an in-depth interview, but they might talk to Chris for 10 minutes, and they'll use one of your sound bites. But it says Chris Edelson, professor at American University, author of, I might mention the book, but again, it's a chance to get out there, and then what we'll do is we'll send that to the dean, we'll send that.
Right, so this is a very nice thing. So you're doing all those things, partly, I mean, I like it, it's fun to do, but you want to get something substantive out of it. Paul will send something around to people, to the dean and people who, it's nice for me to have them seeing this and say, hey, Chris was just on this thing. And that's great.
That's
right.
Really
nice.
And then, are you all familiar with the weekly publication that comes out of our office called Newsmakers? Okay, that's a showcase of what we call the best of the week from across the schools of professors that have done media. So have a look at that. It's in Today at AU on Monday, and you can also go to the media relations website, www.american.edu/media, and it'll take you to Newsmakers. And you know, we try. It's kind of a way for us to say thank you for taking time, because we know you're busy, and we're highlighting, you know, what happened that week for And that goes to the president's office, it goes to the deans, and it's released more generally on Mondays.
It's nice. One time I got a note from the provost saying, "Hey, sign your piece."
So then this was the Constitution.
Yeah, do you want me to go a little quicker just
yeah,
to get the
sure.
So we talked about this. This is just a piece I wrote for this blog. It's associated with the National Constitution Center. They put this up, and then I went to speak there. And then they ended up doing a book excerpt, which is nice. Plus, that's already done. So this took nothing. They literally just took an excerpt from the book and put it on their site. So that was really easy and gets attention for the book.
Okay, we talked about the advance notice. Something
Right.
for you to all think about, though, when you want to speak to us is help us to help you too. Think about ways that your research will be of interest to the media and the general public, so we can help to anticipate media questions. If a news hook develops for research, will you be ready to talk about it before your research is published? In this case, Chris was more than willing to talk about that. We talked about if it lends yourself to an op-ed, making time around the release of publications, because that's really important, to do media interviews, and participating in expert panels is a great way to get out there. I want to dispel this belief that a press release is the only way to get information out there. I think we've talked about different ways. There are experts advisories, there are one-off op-eds, other things. A news release, a press release nowadays has really fallen out of favor. It's really more like an expert advisory, like the State of the Union is coming up. So I contacted several professors. Are you willing to talk about things that might come up leading up to the State of the Union or post-State of the Union? And if so, give me 2 or 3 sentences of what you're willing to talk about. Again, we want you to be in a comfort zone. We don't want you to talk about something that is outside of your comfort zone. And then we talked about the benefits already, being invited to peer institution recognition, being invited to think tanks and other stakeholder organizations. And so what works? News hooks, obviously, that makes it vastly easier. Timing of research in the news cycle, and identifying and being part of the trend to increase the story's news value. So if your research somehow leads to that. I know Rebecca was working on something with the purple line, right? And one of her professors is actually researching a very obscure little shrimp-like creature that happens to live in Rock Creek Park. Now, but if the purple line wasn't being talked about, it would probably be very hard to get that research recognized, but that's a great news hook, and it just happens, it's just fortuitous. Okay, so speaking of think tanks and NGOs, again, that's research with impact, getting the word out, getting American University out there in your departments.
It might also be a C-SPAN thing. I haven't done that,
Right.
but it could be.
It could be, exactly, or giving congressional testimony. That would be a dream.
Yeah.
But let's, like Chris said, we want to leave some time
Yeah.
for questions, and we can go over some of these other things, or go back to some slides.
Thank you. And once again, thanks to Paul for this. It's been for me, it's just been a fun thing to do, so I appreciate it. People have questions?
No?
There will be. Wait. Oh, wait. Oh, here, someone back here.
Oh, excuse me, I came in late, so I'm sorry. I was just wondering how you two hooked up, like how you found him.
Oh.
We did talk about that a little bit, but let me make it clear. So, and this probably should be done better within the schools or teaching units. I had no idea that Paul existed, that there were people to support communication this way. I thought, I had this book that I'd written, it was coming out. I knew it was coming out, it was scheduled for like late 2013. In the summer, I started to think, how can I publicize the book? And that's all I was thinking about at this point. It didn't occur to me to do these op-eds and other things. That was something that came from talking to Paul. So I called some office. I found, I just looked on the website and found something that looked like it might be relevant to that. I figured it was, they connected me to Paul. So it's not right, it should work that way. It should be obviously simpler, but that's, hopefully we're spreading information this way, but that's how it happened. And it led to much more than I thought about.
And to be fair, SPA was without a communications liaison. We have a communications liaison in each school. In the School of International Service, it's Anya Schmemann. In CAS, it's Helen Dodson.
WCL?
WCL, it's Frankie Fitterer. And
Was there a teacher at law school?
And Megan Smith. Sorry, Megan Smith's name was changed to Megan Goodman, I think. She got married.
Yeah, it's not a criticism of communications anyway.
No,
There's so many stuff like
but,
that. But people just don't know about
exactly. But you can definitely, reach out to us, spread the word. I actually have a question for all.
I just want to follow up on that.
Oh, yeah.
So if we do we get the name now of, like, I'm affiliated with the School of International Service.
Right.
But who would I have gone to if I hadn't come here
Well,
to find
hopefully.
out about research, a resource?
Right, so you can come directly to us at
So
at
do you have
UCM. I mean, right on the home page,
Oh.
there's at the bottom, there's media.
Okay.
You can click on that, but it's me. But Anya Schmemann is our communications liaison there, and she actually has a really big staff. And so she'll let me know what research is coming down the line often, but nobody can know everything. But yeah, people reach out to me directly often.
And if we have an adjunct professor,
Okay.
does that matter?
Well, I'll be honest, it does matter.
Uh-huh. And how
It does,
is that?
because there are finite resources
Right.
available. So sometimes I mean, we do tend to focus more on tenure line faculty and term faculty. And that they're easier to get in touch with, they're on campus more. Generally speaking. So that's true, but I work with plenty of adjunct professors as well. I mean, it depends on the news cycle. I don't know what your expertise is, but if you were an expert on Cuba, and on December 17th, I really needed you. So ultimately, we have two clients, the schools and the media. So we want to help our media friends as much as possible so they come back to us.
Yeah, the reason I bring this up is because I've been thinking about I have a couple of ideas for op-eds, because we're doing very cutting edge work that is, and I almost prefer it come through AU than my other affiliation.
Right.
They're not based in DC, and that doesn't really matter, but what I would be interested in doing is at least contacting you, letting you
Right.
know what I'm thinking of doing as we're drafting it now.
Sure.
It could be time sensitive, maybe not necessarily, but I can make it time sensitive actually, because this is an issue that the global development community is focused on.
Sure.
So, but knowing that I'm an adjunct, I understand that, and that's why if I gave you enough lead time, then you could let me know if you could even do anything.
Right.
Because then otherwise I would pursue some other
Right,
avenues.
because in the end, another issue sometimes we're running with adjuncts is they have another affiliation.
Right,
And,
yeah, that's what I know.
And if something, even when best efforts, if American University isn't mentioned, either in the clip or in the article or whatever, it's as if it never happened for us. And so that's how we track things. So we want to make sure in the tagline it says you're a professor at American. And don't worry, don't get caught up on the semantics. I'm an adjunct professor, blah, blah, blah. The media doesn't care. They're just going to put professor. You know, maybe in a tagline it needs to be a little more specific, but.
No, that's what I'm saying. My affiliation with AU in this particular instance is, I prefer to use it because
Right.
it's in social enterprise.
Okay.
It's going to reach a wider audience.
Excellent.
Could you guys, and congratulations on this, it's very impressive.
Oh, that's kind of you. That's fun to do.
I was wondering, I was thinking how WAMU was not part of this description. Did you not
okay.
succeed in, one of two
Yeah.
questions.
My wife always says that to me too.
Did
She's
you
like,
not
"Oh, yeah,
succeed
she
in
likes
getting
it."
onto WAU? Because I know that they tend to be a very difficult nut to crack.
I did something in their office. Remember that? It's not WAMU itself, but it's in their office. It's a show called the Ken Rudin Show. It's like Political Animal or something. He used
Okay.
but yeah,
It's called,
but you
who is
can
that?
Ken Rudin. I mean, right? I know.
Right.
Same. Exactly. He used to do stuff for NPR. So that's big. And he has a show, and he works out of WAMU's building. So I went over there, did a show with him. But WMU itself, I did not do.
Yeah, we work
Usually they're tough to get
We
in.
do work with WAMU, but we own so American University owns the license for WAMU.
Yeah.
So I think
They were reluctant to do too much.
I think they don't want to. They
It
don't want to
seems
be
self-serving,
perceived
yeah.
as just promoting AU expertise. That being said, over the last couple months, we've gotten a lot more requests from the Diane Rehm show, the Kojo Namdi show. We're in the same building now, so it's,
Right.
you know, we see these people every day.
Well, that'd be awesome. Tell me if that happens. My
Yeah.
wife asked the question you do, so.
But, you know, like anything, just like we don't want to send every op-ed to the Washington Post, we want to be somewhat judicious
Right.
into what we pitch to them. But yeah, no, we do pitch them. As a matter of fact, I pitched Bill Liedergrand's book when it came out. They turned it down, but then when things really started when the tea leaves were saying, hey, there's
On
something
Cuba.
going on with Cuba with these 5 op-ed editorials in the New York Times, they called us back because I repitched them, and they said, yeah, let's have Bill Leogrand on. So, no, they're becoming a lot better to work with. But they want variety.
What's the the University Media Relations Office tweeting policy? I mean, I have trouble getting retweeted from.
So a lot of schools,
By you all.
so there's a tweet, so for example, SIS is AU_SIS, SPA is AU_SPA, and I assume the other schools work similar. So we'll tweet out things, oftentimes op-eds, appearances. Like I know Jim Thurber's on C-SPAN right now, and I tweeted something out. Tune into C-SPAN at 2:30 to watch Jim Thurber talk about ethics on Capitol Hill. And then oftentimes the schools will retweet what we tweet.
Yeah, I mean, can I say?
Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
You're talking about our AU media account, correct? So, yeah, I don't think that we have a specific, policy. That's something we can look at if you want us to, AU media, to retweet your personal account tweets. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely do that. We just need to talk about it and make sure that it happens and that we're monitoring it more so that we can probably interfacing with Erica, the public relations
Yeah,
manager.
she does that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, we're in a very, very fast-paced office, so there's not a lot of time when we're looking at Twitter, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that account
But-
is one of, many things that
but
we're juggling. It could be.
What I would highly encourage is use the hashtag AmericanU, include the hashtag for your school, because that's more opportunities that other people are gonna see it and potentially retweet it as well. Because I know Will Patinos from SPA and SIS's person, they retweet almost everything that we tweet out with the professor, so they're monitoring actively. And then the main account, I can't help you with because we don't have access to the main.
Oh,
AU.
at American,
Yeah,
right,
we're at
right.
AU Media.
But are you interested in us retweeting because our followers consist of journalists?
Yeah.
I'm interested in anybody.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Not blots,
Yeah.
spots or anything, but you know.
Right.
Retweets are great.
Yes.
I love them. I
Okay.
encourage it. And my
Right.
publisher's been great in retweeting. I just have a book out.
Okay.
Okay.
And she's been terrific,
Okay.
the publicist there, but I haven't had much success, frankly, with the media,
Okay.
either in the school communication or with you all.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, and just remind people too, be squeaky.
Yeah, hi.
All
I'm an
right.
SOC, I'm Wendy Malillo.
Hi.
This isn't meant as a criticism.
Sure.
I'm just gonna share my experience.
Okay.
I had a book come out in September of 2013.
Right.
I got fabulous media coverage, including NPR's Tell Me More,
Fantastic.
lots of radio, I even got the New York Times. But most of that came, actually all of that came from sources like my publisher or a communications firm I was working with.
Sure.
And even though I followed all the steps
Right.
and alerted University Communications 3 to 6 months in advance that the book was coming out,
Right.
I did not have a successful experience with University Communications.
I'm
And it
sorry.
might have been because at the time, there's a lot of turnover.
There was.
Quite frankly,
There
there was
was.
a lot of turnover.
I'm
And
aware of
so
that
I got,
situation.
and so really, it's not a criticism, it's like I got caught in that
Right.
timing
Right.
issue. So many timing has a lot to do with it.
That's right.
But I'm interested in exploring your comment, Paul, about finite resources.
Right.
Exactly how much time can you devote? Because I have heard Terry Flannery say at our most recent retreat that it's not our job to sell your book for you. And that, I don't think that's what we're expecting.
I think that's right.
But what
I-
I'd like to know, because a campaign is very involved,
Right.
and a 3-month campaign, if you go out and hire an outside communications firm,
Expensive.
is $10,000.
Right.
So what can I, as a faculty
Right.
member, legitimately expect from my university
Sure.
communications office?
So let me give, I can only speak for myself and the schools I handle. So I cover 2 schools. So essentially I'm splitting my time, 50% for SPA, 50% for SIS. It doesn't always work out that way every month. 1 month, it could be outweighted. But with a book, for example, whether it's a book from SPA or SIS, the publisher, as you know, is really the best resource for book reviews. We don't send out books for book reviews. because that's a very special relationship that publishers and people that just focus on that have. So that's, you know that already though. Then with respect to the book, now, what was the topic of the book, for example?
Mine was advertising, public service advertising.
Public service, right, Smokey the Bear,
Yeah.
right? I remember this.
Yeah.
This is when Rick was there.
Right, you do.
I recall, right. So, yeah, that sounded like a very
And
interesting.
I had got great media,
Right.
coverage,
Right.
but the most I got from University of Communications was they put the call through from the New York Times to find me.
Okay, okay. Well, again, I think it does depend on, here's my view. My pitching is only as good as my media list that I've made. And I make that list oftentimes in conjunction with the professor. I want it because the professor might know the publications better than I do. In this case, you probably knew the publications,
Yeah.
the niche advertising publications. I wouldn't know those if you came to me, so it would take a lot of research on my part. So it is a collaboration, so that's true. I do know that we do try to target these to, we just don't send it out. We try to target specific reporters. And that's the best I can say, but you're right. I mean, the book reviews, that's really a publisher type thing. Just like oftentimes we'll hear from the professors, well, my publisher isn't really reaching out to the media.
Right.
And so that's where we kind of fill in the gap. Because, as you know, it's very difficult to get books from the publishers.
Can I jump
Yeah.
in?
Yeah, that's true.
I'm working with a professor right now who has a book that's publishing in 2 weeks, and so, every case is different. I'm working very well with the publisher. We've, it's a little bit of a bigger publisher. We've really impressed upon them from day one that, we want your support and we want to get a lot of coverage. That publisher is handling the book reviews, because again, we don't have that distribution where we can mail out books and things like that. This publisher fortunately is willing to do some of the media outreach as well. So we're actually sharing things, and it's really working out well. We're having a good collaboration, but I think it's just very different. It's a case-by-case basis depending on the publisher and how much that publisher is willing to do, and does the publisher get connected with us so that we can, collaborate.
So you're
figure
willing
out
to
a
work
strat-
with publishers?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, if they're willing to work with us. And in this case that I'm citing to, it happens to be, I think, a really good model of how we can work together to achieve this. So hopefully your next book, that will be the case.
Right. But oftentimes, despite best efforts, our lists aren't perfect, and sometimes, you had great success with the company you're working with outside.
I did fine on the outside.
But inside, sometimes we miss the mark, and that does happen. But I think we have a really solid team in place now. So like Rebecca said, hopefully your experience going forward is more positive.
Thank you.
Could you talk, Chris, about your Washington Journal experience? I know Steve Scully is the guy I think you were referring to.
Yeah, you're right. That is it was a lot of fun. I like C-SPAN.
How did you get on that? I was thinking that's not a bad idea.
You're right. How did that? I'm trying
We
to think.
pitched them.
You got to.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's what? It's like an hour or an hour and a half?
45 minutes.
It wasn't super long. Yeah, it was like 45 minutes. I went in, I was talking about the book, and you're basically just taking calls. I talked for a couple minutes at the beginning. He led in by saying, tell me a little bit about presidential power in the context of national security. I said a little bit, and then you're basically taking calls. One thing that was really nice out of that, one of the people who called, didn't say this, he emailed me afterwards, is a guy who works at a downtown law firm, who's a lobbyist, and I had him come and speak, developed a relationship about it. He came and spoke to students, which is a nice guy to know. So it was fun. On the way out, this is exciting to me. This is a long time C-SPAN viewer. I saw Brian Lamb on the way out, and I told him, I was like, I got this kooky call. So one of the callers asked me about, could I comment on whether Franklin Roosevelt had conspired to, allow Pearl Harbor to happen? And I told Brian Lamb about this. He's like, oh yeah, it's C-SPAN. That was good. And if you watch the morning calls, they always get calls like that. But it was a lot of fun to do, and it was. And again, you notice, you do that, and you get other things that come out of it. It was cool. Right, and that, yeah.
Now, to be honest, C-SPAN, we do pitch them. We have a good relationship with them. But again, it is a give and take relationship in the sense that, for example, they called us the other day and they want to have Clarence Lucene on from SIS, but they want him on at 9:15 on Sunday morning, right? So
right, this was an issue for me too.
So this, again, this is like, it's not always convenient, and so sometimes there's some big sacrifices.
I think I was on right after our second child was born, actually, so it was really tough, but I wanted to do it, and my wife made it happen, but it was, Paul's right, it was crazy. I think she was watching at home with the baby, like, next to her or something. It's hard.
So
But it was fun to do.
So sometimes these things don't necessarily happen when we want them to.
No.
And-
Often they don't.
And they have a hole
it
they
was
wanna
a crazy
fill.
timing. It
So
was-
that
yeah.
does happen.
But shouldn't the default be yes, I'll do it unless I'm teaching a class at that
That
time?
would-
That's my
that would be
But
great.
we're from SOC, we get this. I mean, you
No,
go
that's
at,
my
I've
view
done it
too.
at 5:30 in the morning on NBC.
Right.
You just do it.
Right.
But if you want this, if you want
Yeah, yeah.
this sort of
Yeah, right.
thing, it's not about when it's convenient for your schedule.
That's my feeling.
And I'd also,
Simply, you can't cancel class.
No, you can't, that's the only thing.
Probably
Yeah,
not
that's
one.
true. That's true. But no, that's my feeling.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
the other thing that's really very helpful, and with several of the professors I work with, including Chris, I believe in media karma. So maybe it's a small outlet that maybe you haven't heard of, but that reporter, that journalist, might be at this small outlet today, but next week they might be writing at the New York Times. So sometimes you want to build that media karma up. It's also a nice way, if you've never done television before, rather than going on, CNN or something right away, you could do China Central Television where, to be honest, your colleagues probably won't see you on it, but at least it kind of helps you develop, you realize, wow, I really have to be more concise in my answers, or I need to look up, and I need to do this. It's a chance to practice. Same thing with radio. Sometimes it's easier to do radio in Fargo, North Dakota than it is to do WTOP or, Diane Rehm. And there are different expectations. Lots of television interviews, say for C-SPAN or Charlie Rose or something, they're really just looking for a sound bite. Like when they come to campus and they're taping something, you might talk for 10 minutes, but they may only use 8 seconds of what you said. So be cognizant of that everything you say is potentially something they could use to fill a hole or a gap in their story. So don't say anything that you wouldn't want to be broadcast. The other thing would be for longer form, you obviously do want to be better prepared for a C-SPAN type show because that is a long time. You don't want to get that Cindy Brady effect when the red light goes on and you're just like the deer in the headlights. So for sure.
Do you have resources or that you can suggest for communication training?
Sure. At SIS, for example, we just recently did an op-ed workshop. We did that with the former op-ed editor for the Christian Science Monitor. We hope to replicate that in the future for other schools. It's timing. She's now the Capitol Hill reporter for the Christian Science Monitor, so her time is taken up quite a bit. But we can also, that's like more from the horse's mouth. If it means more coming from her than coming from us. But we can basically do those types of trainings. We can also do media training for television. Everything from what color blouse you should wear to practicing questions and answers. If it's going to be more of a less common 60 minutes type of interview in terms of if it's going to be something that's fairly aggressive to show you how to handle that, like somebody asks you a question on presidential power, I remember telling Chris, well, you can always say, well, that's not a question, that's a question better left to so-and-so.
Right, your instincts want to answer everything, but sometimes you say
Right.
it's just.
I mean, you're not on the
outside
witness stand
area.
when you're doing a media interview, right? You can always say, well, that's a better question for, or what I can tell you is, or just frankly, hijack the question and talk about what you want to talk about.
That's
I
true.
was going to ask you because a long time ago I had some training and once I was aware of that, I saw it happen all the time.
Right.
Someone got asked a question they didn't want to answer, they filled it in with something they did want to say.
Oh, yeah.
And that's still
Yeah.
the same.
And you see that all the time on the television shows. The one thing I do want to leave everybody with, and I'm not saying anybody in this room is making this argument, but I think media is an integral part of everybody's research. I've heard from some professors in the past, not even at this university, but at other universities, that media cheapens our what we're trying to do. You know, I don't want to be a pundit or a talking head. You know, I don't think in our office we're trying to make any of the professors talking heads or pundits. We just want to get your research out there, and it's really an extension of the classroom. I think every day when you go into the classroom, you're in essence, you know, educating, you know, the people that pay the tuition, but this is a chance to educate people that aren't students at American University. So it's a chance for you to share your expertise and raise not only your level of recognizability, but also the AU's. So please, if we call you, be open to maybe doing something and be willing to stretch, especially it's not very often that something is exactly what you're doing research on, but if it's on the periphery, or if it's something you feel comfortable that you could talk about, because oftentimes you're just looking for a nonpartisan academic professor who can speak to something. And it's really going to be more the soundbite type of interview. It's really not gotcha. It's not 60 minutes. So if I can leave you with that, and if you all consider that and spread the word to your colleagues that UCM is here to help you. We do the best we can. We're not perfect, but we do really try. And be willing to try something new. It'll be fun.
Any last questions?
Yes, sorry, I do have one more. Because you said that you give preference to tenured professors, not adjuncts, but I was thinking of here, because a lot of us adjuncts have an affiliation with another group.
Right.
And you said success can be reached by partnering.
That's right.
So it's conceivable then that you could actually combine.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Like we have professors that are involved at the Stimson Center, or they're non-resident fellows at Brookings.
Yeah.
But when I'm pitching you, my priority is to pitch you as being a professor at American University. And, you know, ideally, I know people would like to say American University School of Public Affairs, blah, 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 or American University School of International Service. We're lucky if we can just get American University. I can't guarantee you I'm going to be able to get you American University and also Brookings non-resident fellow. I mean, because I'm evaluating and the university's evaluating on the American University part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you.